The trouble began just after midnight, when the wind died and the cul-de-sac felt unnaturally still. The cluster of identical two-story homes in the Sandalwood Greens community looked serene, like a postcard of suburban perfection. Around this time of night, you could usually hear the faint hum of the highway 3 miles away or the soft clank of automatic sprinklers. But on this evening, every noise seemed muted, as if the neighborhood were bracing for something. In House 9D, the Morrison family slept. Frank and Kathleen Morrison had moved to Sandalwood Greens 7 years ago, attracted by the promise of tidy lawns, family-oriented neighbors, and a homeowners association that promised to keep riffraff and rowdiness at bay. They were in their 50s, originally from the city, tired of midnight sirens and honking traffic. Retirement, or something close to it, had beckoned, and this quiet, expertly managed community had felt like a dream. Yet the dream came with rules. Everything from the paint color on your shutters to the placement of your trash bins had guidelines. The HOA's motto was ensuring harmony, although some residents joked it should have been enforcing harmony. Rumors circulated about the board, how they'd once fined a widow for planting sunflowers too bright and tall, or how they strictly patrolled to keep motorbikes out. But most folks brushed it off as small-town fussiness. Then came the renovation phase, the biggest project in the HOA's history. Half the community was under contract for roof replacements, driveway fixes, and, more controversially, an overhaul of the central fire alarm system. The board insisted the old system, installed decades ago, needed upgrading, and that meant partial shutoffs in certain areas. For weeks on end, the Morrison family and their immediate neighbors in the 9th block had listened to ear-splitting test alarms echo across rooftops. It was more than a nuisance. It rattled the nerves. But no one wanted to question the HOA too loudly. After all, the board was known for its iron fist and a velvet glove. About a week prior, the board made a quiet decision. Since the renovators were complaining that the repeated false alarms slowed their work, and some residents were lodging noise grievances, the main alarms in the 9th block would be temporarily disabled during overnight hours. Just to prevent needless racket, they said. We'll have them back on in the daytime, when everyone's awake anyway. The official email from the HOA, if anyone cared to read the fine print, was suitably vague. It only mentioned that some sections of the alarm system may not function fully during evening renovations. Frank Morrison barely noticed the email. He was more concerned about an odd burning smell that had floated through the upstairs hallway for the last 2 nights. Kathleen chalked it up to some leftover construction debris, or perhaps smoke drifting from a neighbor's barbecue. Their teenage grandson, Leo, was staying with them for the summer while his parents traveled. He'd been the one who first smelled it in the corridor. But in the flurry of daily tasks and the unrelenting beep of machinery outside, the odor was easy to forget. So, in the hush of that fateful midnight, the house seemed to hold its breath. A single spark from a poorly sealed wiring box near the attic ignited. In any other week, the overhead smoke detectors would have shrieked, lighting up every hallway in the block with a shrill, synchronized alarm. Doors would have flown open. Neighbors would have rushed out, banging on one another's windows. Fire trucks would have roared in before the flames could devour anything beyond a patch of attic insulation. But on that night, there was no piercing siren. The HOA's Peaceful Nights directive made sure of that. The Morrison home, soundproof to keep out the usual barking dogs or leaf blower commotions, kept the smell of smoke inside, swirling through the second-floor vents, creeping under door frames like a silent intruder. As the clock crept toward 1 a.m., Kathleen, half awake with a dry throat, thought she saw a flicker of orange light through the crack beneath the bedroom door. She almost dismissed it as headlights on the street. But then she caught the undeniable odor of burning wood. She sat bolt upright, heart pounding, but by the time she shook Frank awake, the overhead light flickered out, replaced by the soft crackle of something devouring the walls. Within minutes, the fire exploded. Upstairs, Leo's door was jammed, the metal doorknob scorching hot to the touch. Kathleen screamed for Frank to help, and the boys' muffled shouts came through the dense, choking smoke. Downstairs, the front door's knob glowed like a coal. The flames had found an easy path through the old wiring, racing along the wooden beams, fueled by the dryness of an unseasonably hot autumn. There was no alarm in the neighboring houses. No urgent wail carried on the wind. The conflagration raged, unseen, in a world of hush that the HOA had so carefully curated. By the time a single panicked neighbor, awakened by the glow of flames through a window, dialed 911, the Morrison home was gone. The final screams that echoed in the blackness that night were heard only by the shadows. In the morning light, a crowd formed around the still smoldering wreckage of House 9D. Firefighters were wrapping up hoses, their faces grim. A stale scent of ash clung to the air. At first, the onlookers believed the Morrisons must have escaped somehow. Maybe they were in the hospital or standing on the curb, coughing from smoke inhalation. It simply couldn't be possible that such a disaster struck them. But hope turned to horror when paramedics carried out a large black body bag. Then another, smaller one. Kathleen and Frank were gone, and so was 15-year-old Leo, the teenager who had planned on writing a short story about heroic firefighters for his summer project. Word traveled in hushed undertones. They never had a chance. By midday, rumors swirled about the cause. Some pinned it on faulty wiring. Others whispered that the roofers had left combustible chemicals in the attic. And one question rose above all the speculation. Why didn't anyone hear the alarm? Within hours, the local fire chief, Sandra Meacham, stepped forward. She announced at a press briefing that the installed detection system, highly sophisticated yet still reliant on older circuit boards, had been turned off that night. She confirmed the small print. The HOA board had authorized partial deactivation to reduce noise disturbances during the final nights of renovation. She sounded weary, as if she'd seen variations of this same tragedy before. Grief-stricken neighbors fumed. A man in his 60s, wearing a sandalwood greens cap, muttered, "Who does that?" Another neighbor, tears streaming down her face, demanded to know who gave the order. People quickly pointed the finger at the association's president, Daniel Prater. Daniel was a self-styled leader who'd once been a mid-level manager at a shipping company. He took pride in color-coordinating meeting agendas and handing out typed lists of fines for various community infractions. Some called him meticulous. Others labeled him controlling. In truth, his biggest sin had been that he liked to avoid conflict, smoothing over arguments with a calm voice and a faint smile. Yet now, conflict found him. Videos of outraged residents at his front door ended up online. One clip showed him, face pale, hands shaking, as he tried to explain, I didn't know it would be turned off entirely. We were just trying to handle a few false alarms." In another snippet, he declared, "It was a short-term measure, a matter of hours. We told the contractor to re-enable it every morning. We never expected." He didn't finish the thought. Meanwhile, the Sandalwood Greens HOA itself responded with an official statement posted on its website. "Our hearts go out to the Morrison family. We are fully cooperating with authorities to determine the root cause of this incident. Safety remains our top priority." The statement read like a standard corporate apology, and it enraged locals even more. Residents who once praised the HOA's dedication to order suddenly saw themselves as pawns in a system that valued quiet hours more than human life. A small but vocal group started meeting at the local coffee shop, drafting a petition to recall the entire board. One of them, Melissa Klein, had known Kathleen from a monthly book club. Melissa couldn't stop trembling whenever she passed the blackened remains of House 9D, remembering how Kathleen used to wave from her porch. As the shock wore off, guilt slipped in. Even those who hadn't voted on the alarm deactivation wondered, could we have done something more? They recalled hearing about the false alarms at 2 a.m. and 3 a.m. that woke the entire block for weeks. People had complained incessantly. "This is ridiculous. I can't sleep. The HOA needs to fix this ASAP." So in an effort to keep everyone placated, the board had done exactly that. And now, 3 people were dead. Behind closed doors, Daniel Prater wrestled with nightmares. He rarely slept for more than a few hours at a time. One evening, he walked into the charred debris of 9D, stepping around burnt beams and melted appliances to lay 3 white roses near the spot where the front door once stood. He thought he was alone, but a local reporter snapped a photo from across the street. That image, a shaken man standing in a circle of ashes, circulated on social media, generating a fresh wave of anger in the comment sections. Lawsuits soon followed. Leonard Morrison, Frank's younger brother, filed a wrongful death claim against the HOA and the contractor who managed the alarm renovations. Local law enforcement opened a formal investigation into potential criminal negligence, citing that the board might have willfully disregarded basic safety protocols. Amid all this, a hush fell over the neighborhood that was more potent than any quiet hours. Neighbors avoided eye contact. People weighed every word they said in public. Vacant stares replaced the once friendly waves across manicured hedges. In the time it took a house to burn down, the entire community unraveled. And yet, in living rooms and kitchens, the same question churned over and over. If we had known, if we had cared, could we have saved them? Little by little, these whispers coalesced into a single voice. We need answers. Outside the ivy-covered HOA administration building, the press gathered for a formal statement. Dressed in a crisp navy suit, Daniel Prater stepped up to the podium. His tie was crooked, a stark contrast to the image of perfect composure he typically projected. Cameras flashed, and the crowd fell silent. "I want to reiterate," Daniel said, voice cracking just enough to reveal the tension beneath his professional facade, that we never intended the entire system to go offline. We were told it would be a limited measure, with safeguards in place. We are devastated by this tragedy. He fielded a few questions about timelines and contractual obligations. Then a reporter asked the question that had been simmering in the public's mind. "Can you confirm you turned off the alarm system on multiple nights, not just once?" He stumbled. There were some nights, but only for a few hours each time, and only in designated zones. The reporters pounced. The grilling continued until an HOA attorney intervened. Her statement a series of ongoing investigation, and we must not speculate refrains. As the cameras cut away, Daniel exhaled heavily. He'd never wanted to speak publicly like this. He'd never envisioned himself as the face of a potential crime. Yet here he was, standing on a sidewalk with microphones in his face. The guilt felt suffocating. Behind the scenes, Detective Celia Hampton was gathering evidence. Her team combed through emails and text messages between board members and the construction crew. They uncovered daily logs by a junior electrician who noted multiple system shutoffs, disabled entire block alarm from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. per board instruction, re-enabled each morning. The logs were dated for nearly 8 nights prior to the fire. In legal terms, it was a ticking time bomb. But not everyone on the board shared the blame equally. Anita Garrison, the HOA's treasurer, claimed she'd been left out of certain email threads. She insisted she only learned of the overnight shutoffs after the fact. But her personal text messages hinted at a different story. Anita, to Daniel, 2 days before the fire, residents keep complaining about the beep. Can't we kill it for the rest of the week? Daniel, we'll see. Mark, contractor, is good with it if we re-enable in the daytime. Anita, good. We just need peace, or we'll never hear the end of it. While none of these messages revealed direct malicious intent, they painted a damning portrait of collective recklessness. "We just need peace" had become a deadly motto. The deeper Detective Hampton dug, the clearer it became that the board had weighed the pros and cons of disabling alarms, at least in some capacity, and collectively decided the inconvenience of repeated alarms outweighed the slim chance of a real fire. Meanwhile, lawyers for the Morrison family estate scoured the ground for anything to bolster their case. They found an old email from Frank Morrison, sent 2 weeks before the tragedy, complaining about a sharp chemical smell in the attic. He had asked the HOA if the renovation crew was using any new materials. The record showed a quick response from a board secretary. "Please contact your personal contractor. The HOA isn't responsible for home-specific issues." That was it. End of discussion. In living rooms across the community, residents replayed that scenario in their heads. What if the board had simply said, "Let's investigate"? Would the problem have been discovered in time? Would the wiring fault have been detected? And if the alarms had been on, would at least someone have survived? The media coverage ballooned, drawing attention from out-of-state tabloids. Suburban nightmare, headlines blared. HOA's deadly decision. In response, the association's PR team tried to quell the uproar, releasing statements about how many safety improvements have been made over the years. Nobody cared. One local radio host sarcastically remarked, "You can't brag about painting fences and trimming hedges when a family just died because you turned off the alarms." Emboldened by public support, a group of volunteers formed the Sandalwood Residents' Justice Committee. They canvassed door to door, urging neighbors to sign a petition demanding the immediate resignation of all board members. Some brushed them off, citing complexities and the desire to wait for the investigation's official findings. But many signed in anger, wanting nothing more to do with this brand of community leadership. While the petitions circulated, so did glimpses of compassion. People placed white ribbons on their mailboxes. A local florist donated bouquets for a makeshift memorial in front of the Morrison property. Even those who once harangued the Morrisons about petty landscaping disputes found themselves moved to tears at the sight of the blackened ruins, the only evidence left of a once warm household. But the hush that settled over Sandalwood Greens was no longer the peaceful quiet that lured retirees and families. It was a heavy, breathless silence, underpinned by a single collective thought. Something like this was preventable. And still it happened here. Within a month of the tragedy, the Sandalwood Greens HOA board had fractured under the weight of lawsuits and public rage. Daniel Prater resigned first, leaving a statement pinned to the community bulletin board. It read, "I never wished for harm. I acted on information provided. I will cooperate fully with any legal inquiries." Within a day, the pinned sheet was torn down and replaced with more pointed flyers about an upcoming protest. The demonstration, organized by the Residents' Justice Committee, took place outside the main gate, complete with signs reading "Alarming Negligence" and "Justice for the Morrisons." Banners fluttered in the afternoon breeze. Local TV crews set up tripods. A shaky sense of solidarity ran through the crowd. Even those who disagreed with the protest tone felt it was a relief to finally speak out. For too long, the board had ruled the neighborhood with a veneer of courtesy and a brazen desire for total control. Inside the gate, a handful of board members refused to engage the protesters. They remained behind locked doors, presumably seeking counsel from lawyers. Word leaked that Anita Garrison was preparing to relocate for personal reasons. A rumor also spread that the entire general fund was being diverted to cover the HOA's mounting legal fees, fueling even more outrage. Residents felt they were literally paying for the board's mistakes. Meanwhile, Detective Celia Hampton continued her meticulous investigation. She interviewed multiple neighbors who had attended HOA meetings. She found that on at least 2 occasions, residents questioned the safety of having the alarm system turned off at night. Meeting minutes from 2 months prior included a note: resident concerns about potential real emergencies during system testing. Board assured minimal risk. That phrase, minimal risk, would haunt the final report. Then came the biggest break in the case: a chain of emails buried in the association's server. The messages revealed a direct conversation about the actual risk associated with turning off alarms for consecutive nights. A local fire marshal had privately warned the board that the margin for error is extremely slim and recommended installing temporary battery-powered smoke detectors in individual homes if they insisted on partial shutdowns. The board's reply was curt: budget constraints. We will proceed as planned. This was more than an oversight. It was willful negligence, a decision that money and convenience mattered more than safety. The local district attorney's office opened a criminal probe. Prosecutors prepared to argue that the board's deliberate disregard for the fire marshal's recommendation constituted manslaughter by negligence. Outrage across the county soared. This wasn't just about one tragic fire anymore. It was a rallying cry against the unchecked power of certain HOAs that sometimes seemed to lord over residents with impunity. lawyers, activists, and talk radio hosts found a new cause célèbre, demanding stricter regulations, mandatory training for board members, and transparency in all major decisions that could affect resident safety. Through it all, the remnants of the Morrison home remained fenced off. The smell of ash lingered, mingling with the scent of newly blooming flowers that people had planted in memory of the family. A tall wooden cross hammered into the lawn bore 3 names in white paint: Frank, Kathleen, Leo. Locals came by daily to say a prayer or leave a candle. A few acquaintances who'd never been particularly kind to the Morrisons found themselves racked with shame. Some had once complained about the Morrisons' Christmas lights being too bright or their occasional family gatherings being too noisy. Now, they spoke softly, tears in their eyes, about how sweet Kathleen's smile had been or how Frank always asked about their grandchildren. Their pettiness felt obscene in retrospect. The press labeled the case the silent alarm scandal. With each new revelation of board misconduct, the headlines grew bolder. Did the HOA choose convenience over lives? Asked one national news outlet. Online message boards seethed with condemnation. People from across the state recounted their own horror stories of HOAs punishing them for trivial matters, turning neighbors against one another. But never had any story approached the gravity of this one, where actual lives were lost. Detective Hampton took a trip out to see Leonard Morrison at his modest ranch house. He was the next of kin, spearheading the legal battle on behalf of his deceased brother's estate. The sorrow etched into his face told a story all its own. Over a cup of coffee, Leonard confided that he never liked HOAs, but his brother had believed in community spirit. They said they cared about neighbors, Leonard said bitterly, staring into his mug. But I think they cared more about how it looked: quiet, clean, perfect. He set the mug down. Now look at what their idea of perfect cost us. Hampton nodded, offering no false comfort. We'll get to the truth, she promised. The truth, in the end, was a stark, unfiltered portrait of a board that systematically overlooked its moral and legal responsibilities. People made phone calls, wrote emails, and had face-to-face conversations about the risk. Every time, they concluded, it can't happen here. But it did. And now the only question left was who would pay for letting a family burn alive in the name of peace and quiet. When the case finally reached the courthouse, it felt like the entire county was watching. Some residents showed up wearing T-shirts emblazoned with the Morrisons' names. Others, more hesitant, lurked in the back of the gallery, unsure whether to blame the board or themselves for the mounting tension that had preceded the tragedy. During opening arguments, the prosecution played a brief audio clip from the 911 call made the night of the fire. The operator's voice trembled as the caller gasped about a house engulfed in flames, no alarm sounding. The jury heard the panic in the background, neighbors shouting to break windows, someone yelling about the Morrisons' teenage grandson still inside. It was excruciating to listen to, more so because it underscored how the entire system had failed. On the other side, the defense attorneys scrambled to argue that the board members never intended to cause harm. They insisted the construction team misled the board about the scope of the alarm shutoffs. They hammered home the complexity of the renovation project, the budget constraints, the wave of resident complaints about nighttime noise. Everyone wanted those sirens off, the defense insisted. They were going off at random hours, causing chaos. But the prosecution methodically revealed that multiple alternatives had been suggested. The board could have installed temporary standalone alarms, or even assigned a night watch. At minimum, they could have alerted the entire block explicitly, encouraging families to stay elsewhere for a few nights if they felt unsafe. They chose none of those solutions. Mid-trial, a star witness emerged. Mark Turner, the junior electrician who'd kept logs of each system shut down. Nervously clutching the witness stand, Mark recounted receiving repeated instructions to just keep the system quiet at night. He testified that when he raised a concern about a real fire, the lead contractor told him, "The board says do it. We're not paid to argue." According to Mark, the entire block's alarms were consistently disabled from around 9 or 10 p.m. until dawn over a stretch of 8 nights. One of those nights sealed the Morrisons' fate. The evidence was overwhelming. In the final days of the trial, several board members struck plea deals to avoid harsher sentences. They admitted to criminal negligence resulting in the unlawful death of 3 individuals. Daniel Prater, though not the only one responsible, carried the highest burden of public blame. He accepted a plea bargain that left him with a prison term, though shorter than many in the community felt he deserved. Following the verdict, the Sandalwood Greens HOA disbanded under the intense scrutiny. The local municipality took over the administrative duties of the neighborhood, promising a transparent approach to safety regulations. A newly elected residents committee replaced the old board structure, focusing on rebuilding the shattered trust within the neighborhood. Yet, even as justice was nominally served, the spiritual wound in Sandalwood Greens remained raw. The burnt skeleton of 9D was bulldozed, and the land was turned into a small, serene memorial park with a bronze plaque listing the names of Frank, Kathleen, and Leo Morrison. A newly planted willow tree arched over a small bench. Flowers and tokens continued to appear at the base of the tree, placed by neighbors who sought a measure of solace in the gentle rustle of its leaves. Reflecting on the outcome, many residents realized that the pursuit of absolute quiet and picture-perfect order had been a warped ideal. Real communities, they now understood, are living things that come with the occasional cry in the night, the beep of an alarm, the bark of a dog. To stifle all chaos is to deny the reality of life itself. In the aftermath, news outlets from across the state interviewed survivors and community members, asking how such a catastrophe could have happened in a seemingly idyllic place. Some pinned the blame on the HOA's obsession with controlling every minute detail. Others blamed the complacency of residents who let the board act without question. Most understood it was a tragic blend of both. Leonard Morrison used part of his settlement to establish a small scholarship fund in Leo's name, aimed at supporting local teens interested in firefighting or EMS careers. He spoke at the memorial dedication, addressing a somber crowd. May we learn from this. May we remember that an alarm, however irritating, can save a life. And may we never again choose silence over warning. His words brought many to tears, but they also rang with a much-needed hope that, even from tragedy, something good, a new awareness, a new respect for the fragile bond that holds communities together, could be born. Sandalwood Greens would never be the same. Parents no longer shushed their kids so quickly. Neighbors began to greet each other more warmly, asking real questions instead of the polite cliches that used to pass for conversation. A new couple moving into the 7th block asked about the quiet hours policy, only to be met with bittersweet smiles. It was quiet here, yes. But after that fateful night, residents decided, if noise is what it takes to stay alive, let the alarms ring. Because in this place, everyone had learned that the loudest tragedies happen when no one hears the warning.